Welcome back. The political spotlight on the Midwest in the 2024 presidential election could not be more obvious after the Democratic National Convention selected Chicago this week as a site where President Joe Biden is expected to be selected again as the party's nominee. Now, that means both conventions will happen just an hour or so apart, with the RNC already selecting Milwaukee as their convention location. Now, I am joined by political science professor David Cannon with the University of Wisconsin. David, it kind of feels like both parties just put this big red flag saying we want Midwestern votes, does it not?
Absolutely. I think the Midwest is correctly seen as really the battleground of the battleground states. And so you have Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, even Minnesota now is more in play. Illinois itself is not really considered a battleground state, but given its central location right in the middle of all those contested states, it really is the part of the country that both parties know they need to win in order to win the presidency.
Is there any precedent here for having both conventions so close together geographically?
Actually, you have to go back to 1972 is the last time this happened. In fact, in 72, you had both parties having their conventions in Miami, Florida. But since 1972, we haven't seen anything like this, having both parties pick two cities that are so close together geographically. And it appears actually that there are kind of two strategies that parties have done in the modern era, which really starts in 1972. Either kind of a rally the base approach, where you have the convention in a state that you're pretty sure that you're going to carry, and it's a way of getting some more energy, in your base, or shifting to battleground states like we're seeing with the Republicans having their convention in Milwaukee the way the Democrats did in 2020. And what we've seen since 1972 is a real shift in the strategy, actually, that in the counting 2024, 6 of the last 8 conventions, including 24, will have been in battleground states. But in the previous 10 elections, only 4 of the 20 conventions were held in battleground states. And so there was much more of a strategy in, before 2008 of having the conventions as a rally the base kind of approach rather than the battleground approach, which we're seeing more recently.
But is there any evidence that the average voter actually cares about what happens at these political conventions, right? To some degree, it feels a little bit more like inside baseball. So do you think the average, say, voter in Wisconsin or Michigan is actually going to be swayed or take notice of the fact, like, wait, they're holding their convention here?
Well, it's a good point that, especially given the time lag between the conventions that happen in mid to late summer, versus the actual election in November, any of the buzz that comes from having a convention in your home state, will certainly dissipate by the time the election rolls around in November. But there is definitely a lot of attention for the state that hosts the convention. And I think the party that is hosting the convention does get some good local coverage and does get at least some additional motivation for their base voters. It's unlikely that many voters are going to be switched to voting for the other party just because a convention is held in a state. So I think that the point's well taken, that this is not going to shift the outcome of presidential elections probably. But I think what is important and what is significant is it does signal at least how the national party organizations are thinking about their overall strategy.
Absolutely. Now, you talked a little bit about the shifting strategy of where parties hold their conventions. I want to flip that script a little bit and ask you about the shifting importance of the Midwest. So, I mean, how long has the Midwest held kind of this vice grip on parties? Is this a recent trend? Is this something dating back a long time?
Well, it definitely is at least the last about 4 election cycles, and especially since 2016. So the last 2, in 2016 and 2020, we saw the Democrats trying to hold what they call the blue wall, which was Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, especially, and Donald Trump carried all 3 of those states, kind of broke through the blue wall, and that's what allowed Trump to win the presidency in 2016. And then, of course, Joe Biden comes back and carries all 3 of those states in 2020. And so I think it's those two elections, with especially those three states, flipping back and forth, being the what really makes the Upper Midwest such a focus now of attention. But dating back even further, like here in Wisconsin, our state has been pretty very hotly contested. Going back to even 2000. Now, Barack Obama carried the state pretty handily in both 2008 and 2012. But you throw those two elections out, and we've had very close elections in this state, and since at least 2000.
Absolutely. Professor, thanks so much for joining us, sharing your expertise. I know that you and I both will be keeping a close eye on these conventions in 2 years, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you again in the meantime.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you, and we will be right back.